turkey, mashed potatoes, rolls, green bean casserole, pumpkin pie, that amazing cranberry sauce shaped like the can, genocide, larceny by trick. Yup, sounds like all the fixins for a typical American Thanksgiving. Ani Bojo, welcome to the first ever episode of the ANGR Podcast. I'm your host, Sofia Syntaxx. You may remember me from such productions as Damned and the Chris Mahana Kwanzaa Variety Show. Today is Sunday, January 17th, 2021. Happy New Year, everyone. We are certainly feeling blessed and happy to be here in the studio with y'all today. And by studio, I mean my closet. No, that's not a metaphor. Miigwech for joining me for the Angry Indian Girl Radio Podcast, or ANGR for short. Be sure to listen all the way to the end of the show to hear the details of how you can be part of future episodes and connect with me, your host, Sofia Syntaxx. Grab your beverage of choice and settle in, because the show starts now. The thing that I'm most well known for, apart from my awesome glasses, is the fact that I'm Native American. Probably on account of the fact that I never shut up about it. I'm also very angry. It's 2021 and we're still dealing with voter suppression, fake news, lack of access to clean drinking water, climate change, and oh gosh, I don't know, the fact that in May of 2020, the Navajo Nation surpassed New York State for the highest COVID-19 infection rate in the United States and still doesn't have proper support to combat this pandemic. Yeah, I'm angry. I am the Angry Indian Girl. The N in ANGR stands for Indian. Maybe some of you looked at the show details and wondered what that meant. Say it out loud. Indian. 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 Like Indian. No, I was not born in India and I'm not Indian. I'm Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Chippewa if you prefer. 3 different names for the same tribe. So why am I calling myself the Angry Indian Girl? Because I saw other cool natives doing it on native Twitter and I wanted to be part of the trend. You know, we didn't all die off in the 18th century. We're still here. And baby, I'm sending up all my smoke signals on 5G. But I digress. Nietzsche's, I have a confession to make. I don't know anything about comedy. I've never taken a class or even read a book about it. But I do recall hearing somewhere that if you do stand up, the first thing you need to address is whatever is obvious about you. So if you're fat, talk about it. If you've got acne, talk about it. If you got crazy, super ginger hair, a carrot top, if you will, talk about it. Make a joke about it yourself and then move on. Basically, just take the wind out of your haters. To quote Tyrion from Game of Thrones, and please forgive my poor Peter Dinklage impression, wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you. So let's get this out of the way right now. I know I don't, quote unquote, look native. Or at least, I don't look like what Hollywood has led the world to believe I should look like. And oof, there is so much to unpack there, child, but we're not gonna get into that part today. I'm not Hollywood native. Which, since we're talking about it, I should probably tell y'all, those natives and westerns aren't even Native American, they're Italians. That's why they're called spaghetti westerns, because they were all shot in Italy. But I digress. Most people, when they look at me, think I'm white. Let's just be real. I have white-by-proxy privilege. I've also heard it referred to as being white-coated. I call it being a pigment of your imagination. Basically, the world treats me as though I'm white, although that is not my culture or ancestry. I do not and will not ever experience the world the same way as my darker skinned cousins do. I can pass as a white person. Ironically, as a child, I suffered a lot over this. I really wanted to look native. You know, like stick straight long black hair, super dark brown skin. Other kids would tell me, "You're not Indian, you don't look Indian." I felt like a fake. I tried for a long time to be white and was so embarrassed of my mother, loud and proud as she is. Everything in our house was native theme, which in the 1990s mostly meant Southwest-inspired decor. Think lots of pastel greens and pinks, plus cactuses. But we're not Hopi or Dene, we're Eastern Woodlands Indians. But you have to understand, there was just nothing in terms of representation when I was growing up. So my family glommed onto whatever was remotely indigenous. But that's a topic for another episode. I feel like I could have just blended in, pretended to be white, and no one in my little suburban school district would have been the wiser. But my mother was having none of that. You see, my mother is a traditional Native American storyteller, and starting in kindergarten, she volunteered to come and tell stories in my classroom for Native American Heritage Month, which falls in November. Because, Thanksgiving. We certainly wouldn't want to talk about Indigenous people more than once a year, so let's lump it all together. Can you tell that I really dislike the fact that Native American Heritage Month is in November? I remember in second grade when my teacher made the announcement that we were going to have a real Native American storyteller come to class. Everyone ran to the windows. I was confused. My teacher was confused. She asked them what they were doing, and one little boy said they were looking for the storyteller's horse. Yeah. I was like, my mom doesn't ride a horse. She drives a Buick. So that's what I was up against. I lost any chance of being able to blend in and assimilate during my school career since my mom outed us from the jump. Miigwech ma. Kindergarten through 12th grade, I was the only Native American in my entire school district. Literally the only one. The result was that anytime anything remotely related to Native people came up in any class, everyone turned to me for my take on it. This is something that has repeated itself throughout my lifetime, and I gotta say, while I'm glad to be able to give some insight, it also makes me extremely uncomfortable. Native American people are not a monolith. I cannot stress this to you enough. According to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. That's to say nothing of the tribes that are not recognized by the U.S. government. So when I speak to you, I do so from my perspective as an Ojibwe two-spirit person. I feel like this is something I shouldn't have to say, but just in case, here it is in plain English. I do not speak for all Native Americans. Which brings me to the main topic of today's episode, Thanksgiving. This is the number one most popular subject I get asked about once people clue into the fact that I am Native. I often get asked, do Native Americans celebrate Thanksgiving? And I like to tell them, we did. Once. In all seriousness, let's unpack Thanksgiving. For clarity, when I say Thanksgiving, I am referring to the holiday that occurs in the United States on the fourth Thursday of November, not to be confused with Canadian Thanksgiving Day, which is celebrated on the second Monday in October. Here's my quick and dirty lowdown on Thanksgiving. The original Thanksgiving feast occurred in 1621 and was shared between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe of what is now southern New England. During the previous year, the Native Americans had taught the Pilgrims how not to starve to death during winter and how to get a good crop going during the growing season. The 1621 affair was apparently a peaceful gathering to express the Pilgrims' gratitude. Spoiler alert, the following decades were full of murder, land theft, and genocide. By the late 1700s, nearly the entire Wampanoag population had been killed off or shipped to the West Indies as slave laborers. Fast forward to today, and we have football, which may or may not include a team with an extremely racist name, family, and fun, right? Family, food, football, fun. Thanksgiving brings together the worst of all experiences. Thanksgiving to me presents a twofold problem because not only do we have to deal with the historical trauma and injustices from the past, but we're also dealing with these microaggressions in contemporary society of having to see ourselves depicted as caricatures of being pushed to the past. I am so tired of people telling me to get over it. How can I get over it when you're constantly putting it in my face? Understandably, Thanksgiving is a complicated holiday for Native people. Choosing not to celebrate Thanksgiving doesn't mean that we don't enjoy turkey, pie, and family as much as the next American. However, the Thanksgiving myth largely shared in mainstream culture perpetuates a one-sided view of a complicated history surrounding this holiday. As I mentioned earlier, Native Americans are not monolithic, and every family approaches this holiday in a different way. Some think of it as a day of mourning, some refuse to celebrate it, some choose to focus on the food and the family, bypassing the ugly history behind why we celebrate. For me personally, I like the gratitude, but not the genocide. And I believe it is impossible to extract one without the other. I do not celebrate the holiday. There are so many things wrong with the celebration that takes place in American elementary schools and the association of Thanksgiving to American Indian culture. There's a lot wrong with the way Americans celebrate Thanksgiving, in my humble opinion. For one, the history of the holiday is rarely, if ever, talked about. Despite the fact the holiday takes place during Native American Heritage Month, I feel like educators miss so many opportunities to talk about these things. Or if they do, they talk about it in the historical past. Like, there were Native Americans, they died, always mysteriously. We never talk about we killed them off. It's always they just died, they just stopped living, they ceased to exist, and now we live on their land. Like, no, we are still here. And I think that's one of the greatest disservices that the American education system does to its citizenry is not discussing us. Like, we are definitely still here. We live among you. We see you. We are like you, and yet we are not. That's my hot take on Thanksgiving. It's basically a trash holiday for me. I do like the time off. I like the food. I can even get down with a Friendsgiving if you must. But I honestly, like, I don't even want to try and fold and contort myself into a way that fits this holiday. I would just prefer to reject it altogether and we're just going to do something else. The fact that Native American Heritage Month is in November just makes it that much worse because I feel like it couples the two by association, and I hate that. Can you imagine little 5-year old me, like child Sophia, sitting in a class watching Zaganash kids make headbands and try to pretend to be of my culture? Yikes. So, my memories of Thanksgiving and my experience of Thanksgiving as a Native person is basically a month long assault of compromise, integrity, stereotyping, and cultural misappropriation. I don't want to be reminded of Thanksgiving. I don't want to think about the traumatic things that happened to me as a kid. The Thanksgiving myth has done so much damage and harm to the cultural self esteem of generations of Native people, including myself, by perpetuating negative and harmful images to both young Indian and non Indian minds. I prefer to have a feast or meal in the springtime to celebrate my gratitude and like thank my ancestors. This is more in line with my personal philosophy as well as my tribal history. For my tribe, for the Ojibwe people, traditionally in the winter we would split off into hunting camps so you didn't have many families trying to harvest from one area. Then in the spring, everyone would be reunited, everyone would come back and live together in the village. It was a time of celebration because all the families were coming back together. You could see which babies had been born, which elders had walked on, all the sorts of changes that happen over a season when you've been separated from your people. So, like I said, I prefer to have this sort of Thanksgiving in the spring. It's more in line with my cultural values, it's more in line with my ancestry, and so that's how I personally do it. In a way, each day is a day of Thanksgiving to the Creator for the original people of Turtle Island. We really try to live our lives in a way which continually shows gratitude to our ancestors and our blessings. So if I want to be sort of saccharine, I can just say, well, every day is Thanksgiving. However, more than anything, I am a worker. And I don't mean that in a hashtag girl boss hustle culture type of way. I mean that the way Marx meant it. I am the working class. And due to the perverse nature of capitalism, I often have little choice over when I'm given vacation and rest. Since I went away to college and my family was still living up in the north, out in the bush, Thanksgiving, being a settler holiday, always has time allotted to it on our academic calendars. So beggars can't be choosers. Basically, that was the only time I was given off from my classes, off from work, was Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I took the time I was given to celebrate with my family when I could. And it just so happened we ate turkey because for real, I never eat turkey except in November. So I ain't hating on anybody who wants to make themselves a quote unquote traditional turkey meal. The food of the holiday is on point. The pilgrims part, not so much. That was a lot to unpack. I know we didn't touch too deeply on the historical aspect of Thanksgiving in America. So if you're looking for more information on that topic, allow me to recommend the All My Relations podcast. All My Relations is a team of folks who care about representations and how Native peoples are represented in mainstream media. They've got decades of experience working in and with Native communities. Listen to the episode titled Thanksgiving or Thanks-Taking with Wampanoag scholars Paula Peters and Linda Combs to learn more about the real story of Thanksgiving. Which brings me to the Anishinaabemowin word of the week. Our word this week is AANII. You've already heard me say this before. AANII. AANII. AANII Bojo. AANII is our word for hello. You can use AANII in writing or in person. So try it out. Next time you see me online, say AANII. Before we dive into my final thoughts, I'd like to remind everyone to subscribe and follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ANGR Podcast, as well as use the link tree, which is linktr.ee/ANGR Podcast, all one word. Use that link and you're able to access my show across all streaming platforms, as well as access my social media where you can @me, leave me comments, likes, all that good stuff. Or maybe you totally disagree with something I said or want to give me feedback on the show. Social media is a great way to connect with me. Now that we've got that out of the way, time for my final thoughts, or as I like to think of it, the TLDR segment of the program. TLDR stands for too long, didn't read. In this episode, we discuss the true history of Thanksgiving and the complicated relationship Native American people have with this day. We learn that Thanksgiving is a holiday we celebrate to give thanks for the things we have, like food and shelter, as well as for other rights and freedoms. But while we are giving thanks, we also have to remember that not everybody has the same rights and freedoms, or food and shelter. So we have to keep fighting so that everyone has both their basic needs met and the same rights. One thing that I am very thankful for, today and always, are our patrons. I'd like to give a special shout out and Chi Miigwech, that's a big thanks to Carrie for becoming our newest member. Chi Miigwech Carrie, we really appreciate you. A lot of work goes into making each episode of the Angry Indian Girl podcast, including researching topics, learning new skills, and fact-checking our sources. That's why we ask you to support us on Patreon. Patreon is a way to support projects that you love and want to see continue in the world. I'd love for you to become one of our supporters too. Go to patreon.com, spelled patreon.com/Sofia Syntaxx, spelled SOFIA/SYNTAXX, and support us at whatever level that you can. Every little bit helps, and you can rest better knowing that together we're putting our righteous anger to good use. Thanks in advance for supporting us on Patreon and helping us tell the stories the world needs to hear. Miigwech minwa miiwi. Thank you, and that's all.